This is the Dumpster Fire Project. Welcome to episode 16 of the Dumpster Fire Project. Our guest today takes following your passion to a whole new level. In fact, our guest has followed her passion all over the world on 4 and 2 wheels, including a 90,000-mile trek across the Americas and part of Europe. She is the Director of Logistics for Overland Expo. Ladies and gentlemen, we're happy to have her, AZURE O'Neill. AZURE, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me, you guys. I'm excited to chat about all the exciting things you have going on and share a little bit of my story.
Yeah, we're excited to hear your story, and a couple of camping nerds like Murray and I really want to talk about Overland Expo a little bit too.
It is a pretty sweet place.
Yes.
Nice. All right, so let's get into it. You've got just an amazing resume, a lot of experience, a lot out there content-wise with Overland Expo, but I'm very interested in taking it all the way back to the beginning when you took the first big jump, which is leaving what appeared to be a comfortable job to go work at a vineyard in Australia. So tell us something about that.
Sure. I think I probably have a background similar to, many people in their 30s. There was a big push for me to, graduate from high school, go to college. My parents were very keen on me getting a good education and getting into a good career and kind of following the trajectory most parents probably hope their children follow. And so graduated from school in Washington, D.C., pretty much immediately got into a job working for a lobbying organization. I worked on the education side, so I ran large-scale events for C-suite level executives and also C-suite and White House level meetings as well. So it was very exciting, but it was definitely a burnout job. And after probably about 4 years of doing that, I was like, gosh, I can't imagine living the rest of my life like this, going through periods where working 80 hours a week seemed kind of light. And I saw the friends around me kind of, a little bit older, doing the same thing. But they were like adding, marriages and mortgages and children to the mix, and just seeming not to necessarily feel happy or able to follow their dreams in a lot of instances. Some of them definitely made it work, but I just thought, geez, if I'm already struggling a little bit, I don't know that this is a good path for me to follow. And I started trying to, move away from that. And the funny thing was, and I think this is something a lot of people struggle with who I've spoken with, who have kind of, followed a similar path to mine to this point, is it was like once I made the decision to leave, everything imaginable happened, it felt like, to get in my way. It was like, okay, I want to get out of this job. I want to leave DC. And it was like within a month, I got a promotion. And then, 6 months later, I'm like, okay, I've got to start figuring out an exit again, have this job on my resume for a year, I'll make a move. And then it was like, I got a raise. And then it was like, things got serious with the boyfriend. And it was like, everything just kept piling up, and I kept staying. And I had a side hustle at the time. I was working for a wine importer in DC and pouring wine for him on the weekends, and, loved learning about wine, really, really enjoyed drinking it. And he was like, you don't really seem happy here. What are your goals in life? And I was like, I want to travel. I want to live abroad. I'm just really having trouble with the exit right now. And he said, I've got a friend who runs a winery in Australia. I'm sure he'd be happy to hire you for a harvest. Do you want me to, connect you to an email? Sure, absolutely. I had no idea what a harvest was. And I was like, I don't care. I want out. This is an exit. And I was literally like, this is something in the wine industry. Had no clue what I was getting myself into at all. I had, worked a desk job and ran events and worn high heels and suits and whatnot for years. And I made the decision to leave DC in November of 2010. And February 2011, I was like knee deep in all sorts of animal shit and cleaning a winery in preparation for harvest. And it was the best experience I'd ever had up to that point. Work-wise, it was incredibly fulfilling and it was terrifying, in a way, leaving that solid job and that income and that 401k and health insurance and an apartment that I, loved, but it was exhilarating as much as it was terrifying.
That's interesting. You mentioned a couple things there, and I think Murray probably wants to follow up on a few things too. But one of the things that caught my mind right away is you mentioned it was kind of a burnout job, and that's kind of been a theme that what we've talked about here a lot. So, what did that factor in? Did that have a role in your decision when it kind of came down to, okay, I do have a good job, I do have a nice apartment, and there's kind of a lot of unknowns here, but I can't continue to see myself doing, this job 10 years from now. Was that a big part of the decision for you?
Yeah, it was a huge part of the decision. I loved what I was doing, but I knew that in order to do it at a level that I would be proud of would never take less than the amount of effort I was putting into it. And I knew that if I wanted to earn more, if I wanted to, be more successful in other ways, that something was going to have to give. And this was not the right path forward for me. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to take that leap because they're in a comfort zone and they don't know how long it'll take. So I'm just curious, how long did it take you specifically until you were in this new role and were like, I got this? Like, what was I afraid of?
I think, so there are a lot of factors, right? And it would be far too easy and cavalier and irresponsible for me to say that I recommend this decision for anyone who is questioning whether or not to make it, right? Because it's not for everyone. At the time, I had no responsibilities. I was renting an apartment. I owned my car outright. I obviously had no children, no spouse. And so it was really just me I was worrying about. And it was kind of like, okay, if there's a time in my life where I can make this leap and not have to worry about anyone, and if I fall, flat on my face, my worst case scenario was I wind up back in my parents' home, and I have a great relationship with both of them. So, I was they were not huge. The stakes were not very high for me, except for pride, but fortunately for me, that's also never been an issue. I mean, just being honest, it's one of those things. I think if you are unhappy enough in a situation, if there is enough, for me, there was this overwhelming sense of if I don't make a change and if I continue to be this unhappy and feel like my life is stagnant like this, I will regret it heavily if I don't make a change and I don't do something to find joy. So your question of, how long did it take for me to recognize that I had made the right decision and to feel good about it is probably just honestly very personal, because I was so miserable prior and feeling so desperate to get out that I knew immediately when I got to Australia and I was working, night shifts, and I was hauling, hoses that were covered in spiders, and I was, covered in grape muck at the end of the day, and just had a huge smile on my face because it was like, okay, like I'm happy with what I'm doing. I feel like, winemaking can be incredibly stressful, but it wasn't like anything like the stress I had dealt with in my previous job. And, the money certainly wasn't there, but I felt like I was having an experience that would bring me more in terms of character and the ability to solve problems creatively and learn on my feet pretty fast. That it didn't really matter if I was going to make bank doing what I was doing or, make a career out of it. I just valued the experience. And I think sometimes knowing that you may not succeed in your first attempt at breaking out of a career, but acknowledging the fact that you will succeed and that you will learn something invaluable from it is kind of the way to go. And I think that's why I immediately knew I had made the right decision.
That's great.
Yeah. So right now, to go back and maybe jump forward a little bit, you mentioned you're in Australia, and now, today, 2020, you are the director of logistics for Overland Expo. So can you? It's probably a really long story, but can you tell us how you left? You left your job in DC. You're making wine in Australia. It seems like you're a lot happier, doing something that you really enjoy doing. But then, how do you kind of come around and now you're back here? And it seems like this is similar to what you used to do, but probably in a whole different field. And I would imagine a lot of people listening to this probably think, well, that's an amazing job, director of logistics at Overland Expo. Where do I sign up? So how do you get there from Australia?
Well, it is a very long story, and I will try to keep it short. Obviously, I'm a bit long-winded.
We got plenty of time. We got plenty of time here tonight.
So I worked that first harvest in Australia, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I was super keen and just wanted to learn everything. And I was a really hard worker. And at the time in Australia, I think that they like the hiring program for Americans and Europeans was pretty good. It was pretty much in my favor. And the company I was working for actually offered to sponsor me after I'd been working for them for 4 months. But, I had just broken out of this job in DC, and I was kind of like, gosh, this would be amazing. But I feel like I'd be kind of selling myself short after I've done all this hard work to get out of one career to just immediately jump into another one. And I said, will you guys give me about 6 months to think about it? Harvest doesn't begin for, another 8 to 10 months. And they were fine with that. And so I purchased a car and I started driving around Australia. So I was in the southwest part of Australia, the Barossa Valley, and I just basically continued south in my vehicle and continued up the east coast. And I'm an avid scuba diver. Like many scuba divers, it was a lifelong dream of mine to dive the Great Barrier Reef. And so I spent some time kind of working my way up the eastern coast of Australia, doing a lot of diving. And I wound up getting a job, just a temporary one for the dive season, working on a dive boat out of Port Douglas in the northeastern part of Australia. And while I was there, I met a cute Dutch guy who had ridden overland from Holland to Australia on a motorcycle. And he invited me to hop on the back of his bike and ride down the middle of Australia with him. So I, finished up my job working on the dive boat. It was jellyfish season, and they're like super teeny tiny and very deadly. And I was kind of like, I don't really feel like hanging out for this. So packed up everything, put my car in storage, and flew to Darwin and jumped on the back of his bike and took a trip. My first motorcycle trip ever. I'd ridden on the back of bikes a lot, but it was my first trip by motorcycle. And I was converted. It was an incredible experience. I loved how everything we rode through or passed, I just felt like I was a part of it, and it was a part of me. And it was incredible to just meet people and feel so much more kind of connected to the travel experience. So fast forward, I wound up working in the wine industry in Australia for the next 3 harvests, but he, the guy I met, his name was Rule, was also interested in wine. And that was kind of how he had made money to keep his round the world trip going, was working in wineries. And so we basically did that together, working in different wineries in the Hunter Valley for 3 harvests after that. And in between the harvests, I should back up. They last roughly about, depending on the area you're in, anywhere between like 3 to 5 or 6 months, depending on where they take grapes from. So we would work nonstop for the harvest period, and then we would take all the money we'd earned and travel. So we spent, 2 or 3 months traveling around New Zealand. We did the same at one point around Indonesia and Malaysia. Did the same around Europe at some stage. And then we decided to come back to the US. I had never, traveled around my own country, and he was keen to continue his world trip. And so in 2013 in the summer, I got my own motorcycle, and he and I began traveling around the US kind of and Canada in phases. And we did a cross-country trip, and then went back to Australia, worked a harvest, flew back to the US, rode to, the top of Alaska, Prudhoe Bay, came back down, worked another harvest in Sonoma, and then we continued our motorcycle trip into Central America and spent probably 8 months, I think, 6 to 8 months in Central America, got the bikes on one of the last ferries to South America. And then I needed to pause the trip a little bit. I had my mom was ill, so I flew back to Florida to be with her. And I actually spent 6 months during that time working as a television news reporter for a local TV station there, which was a cool experience. And they asked me to continue sending videos back to them of our travels when we went back to South America. So when we went back to South America and spent the rest of 2015 and 16 going to the bottom of Ushuaia, or bottom of South America, Ushuaia, and then we rode back up the East Coast. I was sending videos back every week, and landed back in the US in the fall of 2016, and didn't really have too much of a plan other than to work and cash up and head to Russia and Mongolia. And then our relations with Russia kind of hit the skids, we'll say. And it seemed like that might not be a great idea at the time. And to be honest with you, this was probably the first time in, what would it have been at that point? 5 years, I guess, 5 or 6 years, where I was kind of like, okay, this plan of mine, like to not have a plan and just kind of roll with it, is maybe not going to work out super well right now. And, it was fine. I wound up going back to my roots, so to speak. I had waitressed all through college, and I was kind of like, all right, what's a quick, easy job I can get into and immediately start making some good money to save and travel. And then it just realized I wasn't going to be traveling where I wanted to go. So I spent that summer traveling around the US and made it a point to hook up with Overland Expo and give a presentation there in the fall at their East event. And I'd actually met Allison DeLapp, who is Overland Expo's director of operations in Panama when she was living there. And, we'd maintained a moto girl friendship. And she knew I was kind of back in the US and kind of not really sure what I was going to do. And they needed someone to handle logistics. And that was my wheelhouse after all. So that is the very long answer to your short question of how I spent, 7 years traveling and then landed back in the event world. But it's a perfect transition. Honestly, I couldn't imagine a better fit.
How long have you been with Overland Expo? You said that was about 2015, 2016?
It was 2017. So the December of 2017 is when I started working on their shows in this capacity, and it's been great. Obviously up until this year, but even still, COVID is obviously, it's wreaked havoc on everyone in the events industry. What are you going to do? But I think that we've done a really great job of still producing content, trying to keep the community engaged, and giving everyone something to look at every now and again with our virtual events and a lot of online content. So,
yeah, for sure, you guys have done a real nice job with that. I know exactly what you're saying. So my wife and we had it all planned out because I was going to present at Overland Expo. So we were going to leave New Mexico. We were going to stay in Flagstaff. And then we had this whole trip planned out to go to through Central California and go through some wine country stuff. And then it all came to an end very quickly. So I could certainly understand. For those our folks that listen to this, maybe they have never heard of Overland Expo. And Murray and I recently found out that not everybody listens to the entire podcast to the very end. So we figure we might as well give people a little bit more of a shout out towards the front end of the podcast. So maybe tell us what Overland Expo is. And for me, I know being a stressed out attorney, getting out and traveling and going out into the remote areas, especially living in New Mexico, has been a great stress reliever for me. So maybe give our listeners an idea about what Overland Expo is and what it can do to help out a stressed out professional.
Sure. Overland Expo is an incredible event. I attended it first, like many other people, just as an attendee. And then I returned as a speaker presenter for many years while we were traveling, and now work there. And it's basically, we bring together, honestly, the leading professionals in the industry to, train, educate, inspire, and equip people to travel, perhaps around the world, or perhaps, around their beautiful state, like New Mexico, in a vehicle-dependent manner. So either in a, four-wheeled vehicle or two-wheeled motorcycle. The vehicles they tend to be, four-wheel drive trucks with, rooftop tents or campers or trailers that, get dragged behind to provide everything you need to be out in the wilderness and self-sufficient. So, all of the camping gear so you can sleep comfortably, so you can cook for yourself, all of the equipment you would need to self-rescue if you get stuck, a winch, all of the gears and gadgets. And it's I just think it's such an incredible event, because I think even if you're not interested in camping or even traveling or whatever, it's so interesting to see how people imagine and put into reality these incredible vehicles that literally can go anywhere and do anything. So that's Overland Expo in a nutshell. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but it's a great place, and it's good for families. It's great for stressed out professionals.
Yes,
and they're done that. It's a good escape.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, because I had my last vehicle is an old 94 Jeep Cherokee, and I put so much money into that thing that it was not even close to what it should have been worth. And then now I'm doing the same thing with the Nextera. So I know exactly how that goes. And Overland Expo is a great place to go to learn how to do all that stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah, and you had mentioned all the kits and tools that you need, and it sounds like you've had some challenges during your journeys, and I really liked how you tied it to the silver linings. Always looking for the learning lesson in it, and just what's the best that could come from it, and even how you tied it into the pandemic and how we just handle the new situation, look for the opportunities there. So step us through a couple of those challenges that you had while you're on the road, because I know you've got some really good stories there.
Sure. I think it comes back to outlook, right? And one of the things that I learned while traveling and just kind of in general was just to always look for silver linings, because they're there somewhere, and they may not be, immediately apparent. They may not be apparent until, a month or two later in some cases. But I just found in situations where I was, really having a tough time, or where things seemed to be going wrong, breakdowns, or flat tires or whatever it happened to be, there was always something really positive that came out of it. And so in the video you referenced, Murray, thank you for checking it out. My all-time favorite story is this really unfortunate crash I had just outside of this huge city in Mexico. And it was painful on a multitude of levels. Physically, my bike was hurt a lot, which probably hurt more than the physical side of things. And this woman showed up in traffic and, was yelling at me in Spanish, "Can I help you? Can I take you to a hospital? Can I call my husband to help you?" And I was like, no, it's okay. Go ahead. And we wound up reaching out to someone who had contacted us on Facebook, a perfect stranger who had told us his father and mother lived near that town, and if we needed anything to let him know. And, we were in a jam and didn't often, look to others to help us out, but we needed to. There was no way around it. We didn't have the tools we needed. And sure enough, we call the guy. His name is Jose, and Jose was like, "Oh, by the way, do you remember the woman in the green truck who, was there after your accident? That's my wife." We just had an incredible few days with them. And I think, that really solidified for me, in any awful situation, there's always a silver lining, whether it's people you meet through it, whether it's being in a position where you are so vulnerable that you are forced to rely on the kindness of strangers to help you out and to improve your station, or just the knowledge that you take away from it. So many times when my bike was broken down, you don't have a choice. You have to pull things apart. You have to figure out what the problem is. And I became a much better rider through that process every single time. So.
And that was the crazy thing is that the woman that was Jose's wife, this was in like a major city where like 100,000 people or something crazy like that. It just happened to be that she just happened to be behind you, right? Yep.
She just happened to be behind us. And, she was retired. There was no reason why she should have been like anywhere near the city center at rush hour. But there she was. And I don't think we ever actually figured out why she was there. I might have to ask, but it was pretty cool. And they were just lovely. We saw things on the outskirts of that city that we never otherwise would have seen that were just magical, like Avatar-like things. Just super cool.
Right. Yeah. That's what happens when you meet local people. They show you where all the stuff that's not on the map, where all the good stuff is, right?
Exactly. Best part about traveling.
So you said you met this guy through a connection. It sounds like you got the vineyard job through a connection. When all the research I did, I didn't even come across the newscaster thing. So you're kind of blowing my mind here with how many things you've touched. And I'm wondering, how much of that do you attribute to networking and connections that you make along the way, and you just keep building out that network, which opens up more opportunities for you? Or are you just like naturally a master of all trades and super lucky?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. So I'm definitely not a master of all trades, but I'm certainly willing to try. And if it means making a fool of myself while trying, I'm just kind of like, oh, at least someone will laugh. And that's okay, because more laughter in the world is a good thing. So I'm an introvert. So the word like network or networking like makes me really uncomfortable to even say. And I wouldn't call myself a networker, but I do really value meeting people. I think it's just like the best thing for me, traveling, just meeting different people, hearing about, their lives, learning their stories. And so I enjoy that. I make a point to do it everywhere and smile at strangers and all of that. And I also kind of learned along the way that putting out into the universe what you want and letting people know what you're looking for, whether it be a job, an opportunity, an educational resource, a spare part, or a particular type of tire, like whatever it is, when you put things out into the universe, 99.99999% of people are really good and they just want to help other people. And if you think about yourself, if someone comes to you with a problem or says like, hey, like I need this, or this would really help me, it's very rare that you'll encounter someone who doesn't think like, oh, I'd like to be able to help you with that, or I'd like to be able to solve that for you. I think it's human nature. We know it'll make us feel good to help other people or to do something to help someone else along. And I think that just not having any pride about, hey, I need a job, or, I'm looking to learn how to do this and I have no experience, and being humble really goes a long way, has for me anyway.
So also, Murray mentioned that you had the newscaster job, which is cool. But my question is, it seems like once you broke free of Washington, D.C., you got to Australia, you're kind of at that point living a very fulfilling, happy life. And, then you're working to support the travel. Was there any point when you, like, for example, when you got the newscaster job where you're thinking like, well, I could go back to having a regular old day job and I got to travel around, have some fun? Or was it kind of the opposite, that I broke free of this profession that I really didn't want to do and I was getting burnt out, and I'm just going to keep going up down the road that I'm going until eventually it leads to somewhere that I'm content?
So I'd have to say like the cautionary tale of breaking out and doing your own thing and making something like this happen is it the idea of committing to a career can be difficult after that, for me anyway. And maybe I shouldn't say career, but the idea of giving up the freedom to make your own schedule, to, make your own opportunities, be the master of your own destiny in this way, it can be really hard. So to be completely honest, when I came back from South America, the TV station that I had been sending the videos back to, they were really pleased with it. And I thought I would just go back and work for them as a reporter again. And they wanted to move me to the anchor desk and give me a 2-year contract and, a nice salary and health insurance and all of the things that, I'm sure would be a dream come true for many people. And that's wonderful. But for me, I was kind of like, oh gosh, like I can't imagine, committing to a 2-year contract when all I want to do is, ride a motorcycle around Russia and Mongolia. And so I passed on that opportunity. And I sometimes wonder, what if I had not passed on that opportunity? But I think for me, and I think it's probably similar maybe for you guys, when you're thinking about like, okay, what does this look like when I eventually like completely break away from, from this job that someone else, kind of controls part of what I do. Can I go back to that? And I think, some people wind up having to, the side hustles don't work out or what they want to do doesn't work out and they have to go back and, you just make it work. Right. But for me, that's probably been one of the most difficult things is compromising there. And so that's why Overland Expo has been really perfect.
Yeah. It sounds like, it sounds like a great gig. I'm sure it's stressful, especially with COVID, but when you're with the subject matter that you're dealing with there, that has to help with, finding meaning in your work because you're planning, the world's premier expo on something that you enjoy doing. And that's something that we stress on our podcast a lot, is trying to find, our guest that we had last week on here said, you could be working at a bank, but if your passion is to bake muffins, you might make a little less money, but you're going to be a lot happier if you're just baking muffins all day instead of working at the bank that you hate working at. So it's kind of cool that you found a job where you still get to talk about what you're passionate about, and then yet it turns into a pretty good career. So that's pretty awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice to be able to get back. Sorry, go ahead, Murray.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I find it funny that we brought the muffin thing up again because we got on a tangent. We talked about it for like a half hour on the last episode.
Don't let me talk about it.
We talked about it so much that everyone was hungry by the end. So we'll stop the muffin talk right there.
All right. Otherwise, I'm going to have to bake.
Right.
No kidding. So another thing that I found interesting about your travels is it sounds like you would travel and then you would probably have a budget plan. And then when kind of the funds got low, it was, let's try to find work to continue the trip. Did you have to plan the trip around that budgeting idea, or kind of tell us how that went?
So a lot of people don't believe this, but we never actually had a budget. Ever. We just kind of thought, okay, like we need to make enough money, and like kind of like had a very loose idea of what enough money was to, travel for, let's say, 8 months. And so the plan would really be to like travel for 6 months and then stop and find work probably. But it was like, there was like this cushion amount. And we honestly would just travel as inexpensively as possible. So like you guys like camping, I set up my tent the other night here in Vermont, and it was really a cool experience because I spent 2 years largely living out of that tent. So there were definitely, a lot of people think, oh, you traveled around the world for that long, like you must be made of money and whatever. No, there were a lot of nights where we camped like next to train tracks, woke up and shared campfires with homeless people, and it was not always, the pretty sunset pictures that we all post on Instagram. But all of it was a wonderful experience, and there was something to be learned from every single moment there. But there was no budget, and we would just kind of try to make it work. And honestly, when you're traveling that much, you get to a point where, the travel becomes work, and it's no longer like a fun, always cool new thing. And then that's when it's time to go back to work, so that you appreciate work again. And then, when you eventually get sick of working crazy hours in a winery, whether it's like 12 or 14-hour shifts or overnights or whatever, then you go back and you travel once harvest is over. And it was a really good mix. And the way harvest in the wine industry works, you can predict it based off of the seasons, right? So we spent some time volunteering at a Canadian winery for a period of time. And then we made sure to line up our Australian harvest after our Alaska trip. And then when we were in Chile, we did some, wouldn't really say like work, but we kind of exchanged work for housing while we were in Chile, because we needed a little bit of a break from the road, needed to do some maintenance on the bike.
Yeah, I hear the wine's really good in Chile.
It's phenomenal. It was not a hardship to be hanging out there for a bit and, working for our room and board.
What is it like to essentially live and drive a motorcycle every day? When I was in law school, Murray lived a couple hours away, and I remember I had this bright idea one April morning in Michigan where it was still summer, hadn't come yet. I took a trip on my motorcycle to see Murray. It was like a 2-hour drive. I had to stop at a Walmart like halfway through and buy like long johns and everything. I get to Murray's house. I'm like, I don't want to do anything. Just give me 2 hours to heat up. This is crazy. So what is that like?
Again, there were definitely days that were like not super pleasant. But especially, we wanted to do some hiking and traveling in places that were, had cooler climates. So there were, mornings where, we woke up in the tent and there was a frozen water bottle like beneath the sleeping bag that was between us. And then, you go out and you try to start the bikes and they're just like, no, like we're done. Like, can't believe you did this to us, and like left us out overnight. And so then you're like, trying to push start a bike, in, 30-degree weather. It's not always super pleasant, but it gets you warm. So again, silver lining, not something I want to do, but it worked out. But yeah, there were definitely days where there wasn't enough clothing in the world to keep us warm, and you just keep going and it becomes part of the story. So
it's all part of the trip, right?
Yeah. It's
not all beautiful sunset pictures. You gotta, like, Murray and I have taken these trips before where it rained for like 5 days straight. We never got out of the tent. We're like, hey, we had a pretty good, it's one of our most memorable camping trips. Never got out of the tent, rained the entire time. For whatever reason. That was,
yeah, we made it work.
This was in northern Michigan many years ago.
Got it. I won't go there.
Yeah. It's either snowing or raining. There's, what is it, sunny about 3 days a year in Michigan, Maria?
Yeah, that's the running joke. It's like, all right, we get 3 months of summer and 9 months of winter.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because of COVID. This is the first year we have a big group of friends. We try at least, for a week, a year. We've kind of all made a pact that we'll take one trip. And this is the first year in a long time that we haven't been able to do it. So COVID definitely has been a challenge, I think, not just for side hustles and businesses, but just trying to survive through this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I have to say, when I went out camping by myself last week, it was super, super, super good to just have that kind of mental health day and night. And it made me sad too. A lot of people are missing out on this, or, don't have the ability to get out of the cities they're in or whatever. But I don't know, maybe you guys could do like a virtual camp out thing in your backyards or something.
Yeah. We tried one not too long ago and I drank too much and it ruined the whole weekend for me, which is pretty much how camping usually goes anyway.
Yeah.
Good times.
You said something on your YouTube video too before. I know we're starting to get kind of into this, but I was like, I got to ask you about this. You said a quote. You said, "It's not an adventure until something goes wrong." And I can't remember what you were talking about, but I was like, I love that quote. Do you remember what you were referencing when you said that in the video?
Oh gosh. I mean, it could be any number of things, honestly. It's, it's, if everything goes smoothly and you don't have to figure anything out, there's no challenge, there's no obstacle you have to overcome. There's no adversity that you have to figure out a way around. Right. So for me, no one ever wants anything to go wrong, but when it does, it gives you the opportunity to meet people you probably wouldn't otherwise meet and figure out something you wouldn't otherwise figure out. So yeah. And I have friends who will text me photos of their motorcycles broken down on the side of the road, and they'll say, "Oh, guess my adventure starts now."
So. Now it's time. Yeah, that's awesome. What would you say to people that you kind of caution your tale that it maybe not for everybody? What I've kind of found is I think you're absolutely right. I think the younger that you are and the least amount of responsibilities you have, the easier it is to kind of make the transition to do something like you did, where you leave the job and go out on your own. For Murray and I, we're married. We got houses, we have mortgages, so it's a little bit difficult trying to do it. Not to mention, I don't know if this happened with you, but I get a lot of questions from my mom or family members saying, Erik, you were a chief deputy district attorney, you were in some high profile cases. I can see you're kind of, you took a job now where it's a little less stressful, but what's in the future? Are you going to go work for a big law firm? Are you going to start your own practice? And I try to tell them, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to teach and go to conferences and speak. They're like, what? Why'd you go to law school then? So I guess my first question is, have you had any friends or family kind of say like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And do they kind of understand that you're doing this to create more meaning in your life?
Yes. And no. So, I think my friends and my family fall into two categories with that. And fortunately, the category that's been very positive, and even if they haven't had a huge amount of faith, they've like reserved judgment. That category is like, that's a large chunk of my friends and family. And when you make a decision like this, the people who stick with you through it, it's a really good test of friendships, and it's a really good, it's a good way to see kind of how those friendships rank, I think. I have, lost some friends who are very dear to me because they just, couldn't understand the decisions, that I made to just live a life that is very different and, not really predictable. People who ask about 5-year plans. Honestly, my 5-year plan is just to like make decisions that make me happy and hopefully help make the world a better place. Like that's really kind of it, and of course, the value I place on relationships and friends and family in there ranks pretty high, but that's it. So I've been really fortunate that most of the people who are close to me have been really supportive. But I've definitely lost a few people who were also dear to me. And, everyone has to.
It's unfortunate. It's understandable, though. I kind of experienced a little bit of that myself. But to follow up on that, what would you tell someone, that's kind of maybe in your shoes that you were in several years ago, where I've often heard it explained as like having a good job, getting a salary. It's like a drug that you're on, where even though you're miserable and you may hate the job, but you're making really good money, you can get a new car, you can take maybe that one vacation a year, and the salary just keeps you there. You're afraid to take the jump. You're afraid to take the leap because every 2 weeks you got that salary coming in. And I think a lot of people are afraid because of that. Maybe they're afraid of what people will think. They think they're going to fail. What advice would you give to someone that was maybe in your shoes that really wants to go do something else with their life, but they're kind of stuck in a job that they hate? How do you get unstuck? What was some advice or something that you did that can help them take the leap?
Yeah, so we called it the golden handcuffs, what you're describing. It's that you're literally just locked into this money cycle, right? And the way our society looks at money, it's a well-worn subject, right? We talk about, earning more money to buy more things, to get into more debt, to then have to earn more money so we can pay off that debt and then buy more things. It's a never-ending cycle that we have been, told largely that things will make us happy. When in reality, that is, probably not the case for 99.999% of people. For me, listen, as we discussed, I didn't have a lot of responsibilities that I had to worry about. I did save up money before I went the first time and had like a good little nest egg in case I fell flat on my face and needed to, come back and start all over again. But I think that, the advice that I would give to anyone, regardless of whether or not, you were like me with very few responsibilities or, someone with, a family and a mortgage and a lot more responsibilities, is just to consider regret. Honestly, I think it's really easy to say, oh, what would make you happy? Go do that. But I frame a lot of things in terms of, if I'm trying to make a difficult decision, okay, like 20 years from now, if I look back on this moment, what would I regret more? Would I regret staying in this job, in this situation that's making me unhappy and shows no promise of making me any happier? Or would I regret, potentially taking a chance on getting myself out of that? And I think the thing is, I've been very fortunate that it's worked out for me. But for people with children, I think it's an incredibly powerful lesson to show children, what it is to be brave and to, to take a dream and make it work, or at least try, and, for anyone, I strongly advocate against settling. I think that we all have incredible potential, and settling is just not something anyone should do. Whether it's, career-wise, whether it's, what you do as a hobby, what you do for fun. I think a reset is always a really good thing. So.
It's well said. I couldn't have said any better, Murray. What do you think?
Yeah, so we're coming up on the hour here. So I do have one last question for you. You've done so much. What was your biggest learning moment? And then what's next? Assuming COVID opens up and you're free to go do whatever, do you have something else in mind now that you're strategically shooting for, or are you just day by day and let's take it as it comes?
Oh, so the biggest learning moment is really a tough one. But I think that it was more of an aha, and there were multiple moments that led to it. But for me, it was realizing that, that when I was traveling, you know, people always ask you, what's the most amazing place you've ever been? What's your favorite country? What's the best thing you've ever done while traveling? And for me, there was a realization one day that, like, I didn't care if I went to another waterfall. I didn't really feel like taking a turn to go to a pyramid. Didn't feel like making the effort to, you know, ride my motorcycle up to the top of a mountain to take a pretty picture. But I was willing to spend an hour at a convenience store struggling through a conversation with a woman who spoke a dialect that I would never have any hope of understanding or being able to, you know, properly communicate in. And just realizing that it was those interactions and it was the people that I was meeting along the way that were the most important part of my travels and, you know, contributed the most to the experience. That was it for me. And so the beauty of that is that while I am, you know, well, no one is really traveling during COVID, right? Even though I'm wearing a mask and even though my interactions with people outside are limited, there are still so many ways to connect with people still and make it meaningful. And that for me, that human connection, even though I'm an introvert, and acknowledging that that's really what makes the world go round is these relationships we form with people, however deep or superficial they may be, are really important. That's the biggest learning moment for me, or aha moment. And then next up, geez, I mean, I'd still really love to do Russia, Mongolia. It's a dream I've held on to for a long time. And Africa, you know, I'd love to ride a motorcycle through Africa. So we'll see.
What are the logistics like? Let's say you want to go to Africa. You know, you got to get the bike over there. You got to have, I imagine you probably have to take a ton of parts with you or try to figure out in your route how you're going to get those parts. But does it take a lot of planning to pull off a trip like that?
You know, it does take a fair amount of planning. To be honest with you, I plan a lot less than a lot of other people do. I like to talk to locals, obviously, and you know, I have a loose plan of where I want to go and what I want to see, but I like to let locals kind of dictate the route I take. You know, both because, like you said, they'll know the really cool places to tell you to see, but they'll also be able to tell you which roads are in the best condition or, you know, what's the safest route or whatever. But there are a lot of logistical things, you know, that need to be accomplished in advance, like, you know, shipping and figuring out, you know, what the rules and regulations are for, you know, whatever country you're shipping into. You need a carnet de passage for your vehicle in Africa. You know, you need to figure out the various visa requirements for countries, you know, anything that's required for those visas needs to be sorted. And Africa's a little bit, it takes a little bit more effort than, you know, say Central or South America. But
I can see that.
It's all part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. We're coming up on the hour here. Can you tell us what's going on with Overland Expo's virtual events? And are we planning on coming back live next year? Yeah.
So our virtual events are, we're all really excited about them. You know, it's hard for anyone to be in this position and feel like, you know, we can't contribute to the community we all love. And, you know, work-wise, felt like we were spinning our wheels for a while. And so these virtual events have been a really cool outlet, I think, for our staff to really, you know, bring together, you know, contributors to our events. You know, this one we have coming up on August 8th. It's a Saturday. We'll be bringing, you know, Sam Manicombe, Simon and Lisa Thomas, Dan Grech. They'll be together for like a live panel discussion in the morning to kind of kick things off with the guys who ran the Armchair Adventure Festival in the UK. So they'll be kind of hosting that for us. And then it'll just continue on with a string of 20-minute long videos that will premiere that day. We've got 7P doing a session about, winching, kind of a kind of overview to kind of get your feet wet with how to there. We've got a roundtable on, traveling to Alaska. That'll be fantastic. We've got like an outdoor camp cooking session with Chef Corso. That's pretty dynamic and cool. And
nice.
kind of like your muffin talk. Like I had to preview that video, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to need to eat dinner at like 2:00.
Yeah. Camping food is the best.
It is. So it'll be really cool. We have another one coming up in October that we're working on the programming for now. And it's just great. It's a good opportunity to bring everyone together. We'll have a lot of live giveaways on our Instagram feed. So definitely tune into that, you guys, if you need to kit anything out. And it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Where can people sign up to view the virtual events?
So overlandexpo.com/virtual is kind of where you can go for everything. We've got the schedule loaded there. We also have virtual campgrounds. So you can enter your...
Murray, you hear that?
It's cool. I mean, I think one of the best things about our event, honestly, is the camping experience, the camping side of it, being able to walk around, look at other people's rigs, see how they've set things up. So that's a fun part. So you guys should definitely enter that.
Yeah, we'll be there. And I'm looking forward to, hopefully, that's been a tough year. We're going to get this COVID behind us, and hopefully we'll be back next year. And hopefully Murray and I can meet you in person at next year's event.
I would love that. We're working really hard on kind of figuring out how to best implement all of the practices that the CDC and the county and local governments are advising for live events. And that's obviously a moving target. So we'll be paying close attention to that. But right now we're all dying to get back into the live events. So we miss everyone and seeing everyone in person. Sure. So I look forward to meeting you guys then.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Can't wait. Well, Azure, can't thank you enough for coming on here. Your stories are amazing. And I think you've given our listeners, and I can speak for myself, like I just kind of come out of this really inspired, just the things that you've done, and the fact that you took the leap and you did something, and clearly it's paid off. So I think we're really happy to have you on here. Can't thank you enough. I know it was kind of a crazy combination of things that led to you coming on. So thank you so much.
Yes,
Murray, you have anything else?
No, just a huge thanks. A lot of inspiration out of all this story. So thank you. Thank you, guys. It's been really nice chatting with you. And I love that you're doing this. I think anything that can be done to encourage people to break out of the mold that they're in and find happiness and purpose and, do cool stuff or at least give it a shot is really awesome. So thank you guys for doing this.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Everybody, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hang on. Don't turn it off just yet. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider subscribing. We'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know what topics you want to hear us talk about on here. As always, you can find me at tacticalattorney.com. You can find Murray at fullvolumesolutions.com. Appreciate it, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.